Fresh meat.
You're gonna need a bigger boat on today's episode of Playing with Fear. Welcome to JoBlo Horror Originals Playing with Fear, where we take a look at some of the landmark horror titles throughout the history of gaming. Today we'll dive back into the somewhat murky waters of LJN licensed Nintendo games with a game based on a movie that is simultaneously one of the greatest summer blockbusters of all time and also one of the greatest creature features ever. Well, kinda. And I only say kinda because while I'm guessing a lot of people assume the game from 1987 is based on the Spielberg 75 classic, it's actually based on the fourth movie, the one that bought Michael Caine a house. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Jaws is the 1975 masterpiece directed by Steven Spielberg and adapted from his own book by Peter Benchley. Benchley wrote Jaws in 1974, and while it differs a bit from the movie, it follows the main points pretty well. Benchley sold the rights for $150,000 and was paid an additional $25,000 to write the screenplay. The movie was a hit, to put it lightly. It has made over $470 million through all of its theatrical releases and was, for a time, the most successful US release film of all time.
Smile, you son of a...
When award season came around, it was nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Picture, and took home Best Sound, Editing, and Best Music. This would guarantee the franchise would continue. Like most big-name franchises, Jaws would follow the laws of diminishing returns, with Jaws 2 being the best, Jaws 3D being of the time that 3D was back in vogue, and ended up being silly but fun, and really, really dumb, and Jaws the Revenge is easily the worst. Jaws the Revenge isn't even talking about the family seeking revenge on any sharks, it's about the damn shark lineage seeking revenge on the Brody family. In addition to movies, Jaws would get all the accompanying merchandise like toys, books, comics, and video games. While there would be attempts at getting Jaws games off the ground, the first successful one would be today's pick, Jaws for the NES. I'd like to thank you guys for watching Playing with Fear, and ask that if you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now. Like this video and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video goes up. And now, back to the show. Jaws was published by LJN in 1987, but like everything else, was developed by another company. This time it was again Atlas, who here actually subcontracted the development to Westone Bit Entertainment. That's 3 companies involved in what is essentially a 30-minute game, but 1987 games were certainly built different. LJN has received quite a bit of play in our channel, and while they absolutely published some real dreck over the 8 and 16-bit generations, I actually like quite a few of them, even outside of our 2 previously discussed slasher entries. Atlas even got in on the action earlier, as they were the ones that developed Friday the 13th for LJN just a couple years after this. As discussed in that video, they are most famously known for the lengthy Shin Megami Tensei series of games. 1987, though, was just too busy for them on the NES, with also having to make the Karate Kid video game tie-in and the Famicom-only release of Digital Devil's Story. Gee, I wonder why that didn't make it past Nintendo of America. Instead of doing a rush job on a 3rd game for 1987, they threw the creation duties of Jaws to Westone Entertainment. Westone probably doesn't ring a bell for most, but they have a pretty big IP under their belt. Wonder Boy was released in 1986 and was a huge sensation. It was released in the arcades, but also later for Sega's early consoles SG-1000, Master System, and even their ill-fated handheld, the Game Gear. While they would release games for the better part of 2 decades, the Wonder Boy franchise would be their most popular and the well in which they would find continued success. Jaws would be released in November of 1987 to mixed reviews, but pretty decent sales. The story here doesn't actually follow the all-time classic film. It doesn't actually follow the 4th film really either, but anyway, as I stated earlier, it gains its inspiration from that film. The box art takes its shark picture directly from the movie poster, and certainly the final act, which we'll get to, mirrors the film, but other than that, well, I'll just read it straight from the manual. This can't be! There has never been a great white in these warm tropical waters before. Never. This is more than a coincidence. This shark appears to be possessed, as if it's hunting you down. Like it's personal. You better prepare yourself and strike back before it's too late. Will you use the mini-sub, the seaplane, sailboat, or just scuba gear? Perhaps it won't even matter. Remember, this is some kind of unbelievably powerful eating machine you're dealing with. Quick, grab your weapons, pack your explosives, and check your maps. It's out there. You know it, and it's coming for you. This is serious. This is the ultimate Jaws challenge, because this time it's not over until only one of you is left alive. Jaws is a strange mix of things gameplay-wise. It has a minor leveling up system like an RPG, a strange side-scrolling shooter feel in the meat of it, and even an arcadey bonus game that you can use to help or just get points. The game is broken down into a few different screens or sections. From the opening screen, you hit start and are shown your sailboat with all of the accompanying score tallies. The important ones are on the bottom. Jaws' power is his life bar, and the shells are your currency to upgrade your own power. The main idea of the game is to travel between ports and upgrade your power. You do this by running into a fight scene while on the main map. The screen shifts from an overhead view to the boat to a single screen of the player as the diver with jellyfish, stingray, and eventually sharks coming at you. You shoot them with the spear gun and hope they drop a seashell. While stars can also drop, they only add to your overall score rather than help you upgrade the spear gun's power. Every now and then you'll run into a bonus game. Within this game, the player stays in a plane and bombs groups of jellyfish as the plane flies from side to side. You can't get hurt here, and the more jellyfish you destroy, the more shells you get. The more shells you get, the quicker you can turn Jaws into a large-scale seafood buffet. These bonus screens are helpful, but they aren't the meat and potatoes of the gameplay. That is reserved for the main trips into the ocean. Though you would expect these to get stale, and they do, the game at least tries to vary these screens with the movement speeds of the sea creatures trying to get you, as well as adding new ones like smaller sharks, and even varying the sea level depending on how close you are to the port. The lower the water level, the more difficult it is to maneuver around. You go from port to port, bringing these seemingly useless shells and using them as currency to upgrade your power. You also must purchase a receiver that helps you find the titular beast. As you go from port to port and from scene to scene collecting shells and upgrading your power, you can choose a couple of other options as well. There's a submarine that will give you an extra hit when you're underwater, and you can also seek out Jaws and have a battle with him. I wouldn't recommend this with a power level lower than 4, but you can chip away very slowly at his health by doing this. The longer you take to do this though, the more opportunity he will have to regain some of his health. When you're ready to take him on, be careful. If you die, not only will he get his health back, but your own power level and number of shells will reduce as well. When you fight Jaws, it also won't be only him in the area. All the other enemies you run across will be able to take part as well. After you take his power down to 0, you will be instantly transported to the final fight of the game. It changes gameplay styles again and almost becomes a first-person shooter, where you see the front of the boat and are tasked with dropping one of the 3 strobes to force Jaws out of the water, and hopefully onto the front of your boat while he'll be punctured and killed. Use up all 3 of your strobes without getting him, however, and it's back to the seas with you, and you have to have the side-scrolling fight all over again. Make sure you time it right so you can tell the shark, "Smile, you son of a..." And then the game ends with Jaws sinking to the bottom of the ocean, and you fleeing the tropical vacation via airplane. Is Jaws scary? No. But like we've mentioned in previous titles, a horror experience, certainly in video game form, doesn't need to be scary to be enjoyed. The title screen does a nice rendition of the Oscar-winning score. And sure, when you see the fin pop up in the ocean, especially if you aren't ready to take the fiend on, a certain sense of anxiety can pop up, but there really is an example of terror felt in the entire experience. The only other horror I can think of is that which is experienced if you happen to die and lose a lot of progress, or fail in the final screen and have to repeat the previous battle. Truly frightening. LJN, your reputation here again is another case of bark versus bite. Is this game the greatest thing that hit the NES? Well, no, of course not. But is it the bottom-feeding parasite that LJN games, especially of this era, tend to get credited for? Far from it. I'd say it's better and much quicker experience than the movie it's based on. Again, remember, it's based on the 3rd sequel, not the original, so don't hate me. With some practice, you can get good at it, and I can see the appeal for Jaws fans or NES aficionados looking to find a cheap, fun time to be had. Usually when we discuss our games here, we talk about all the ones that came before it that led to the culmination of the video's subject. With this game, however, and believe me, the history here is a bit muddled, this was actually the alpha, the first experience. While the movie franchise would die with Jaws the Revenge, the video games would build a legacy that would outnumber that of the original films. 1989 would give us Jaws the computer game for the Amiga, Amstrad CPC, Atari ST, C64, MSX, and ZX Spectrum. With this many different systems, you wound up with a game with the same name that ended up giving the users different experiences based on the machine they had. It's much more involved than the NES game, and depending on the system, looked and sounded better too. A different, text-based adventure game would also come out in 1989, simply called Jaws, and would land both on the Apple II and DOS platforms. Completely different experience from both the 1987 and other 1989 outputs, though I'd say this would be my last choice for 80s Jaws video game experiences. The franchise would go dormant like the movies until a brief segment of the GameCube game Universal Studios Theme Park Adventure in 2001, in which you try to stop Jaws from scuttling your boat. 5 years later would give us Jaws Unleashed, which was Unleashed on the PC, PS2, and original Xbox. This game really deserves and will probably get a video of its own, but for now just know that you get to play as Jaws in this one, and it's exactly as fun and bonkers as you'd imagine. Jaws Ultimate Predator would be released for the Wii and DS in 2011, and would of course give you two fairly different experiences. Both games though let the player control Jaws again, albeit with less of an emphasis on wanton destruction. Between this and the Gremlins games, the Wii and DS were just full of games that you wouldn't have guessed were real. Other than a couple of mobile games here and there, the last Jaws-related release would be in 2017 with a board edition to the wildly successful and lovingly created Pinball FX3 on the Switch, PC, PS4, and Xbox One. While there aren't any new Jaws films on the horizon, and hopefully a remake will never happen, video games are another story. We could get a remaster or remake of Unleashed, or more spiritual successors like the wonderfully bonkers Maneater that came out recently. Which of these games have you played, and what was your favorite? Do you want to see another Jaws game? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you on the next episode of Playing with Fear.